But so here we are with the American reality, and he came here, Master came here, because this is a place where you can start churches. Our Italian friends were just so confused by the fact that we were starting a church. Like, you don't start churches, there's just the church, you know? and in America, we're always starting churches. Anybody can start a church, you know? So we're starting a church. In Italy, they couldn't call what we're doing there a church. It was just ludicrous. It was impossible. So they used the Indian word sangha, just no way. But Master arrives here, and he knows what he's doing, but he's in the play. We were talking about this a little while ago. For any of you who have ever done any acting and with a costume and your entrance on, I was watching the ballet in New York when I was there a couple of days ago, and the dancer just does her great leap and then flies off into the wings. And you know, as soon as she's behind the curtain there, you know, she's flat-footed and puffing and probably drinking a little water, just getting ready to race out there again. But as soon as she comes out, all of that is forgotten, and she's just on that stage. And if you're in an act with a play with no intermissions, in which you never go into the wings, you just put that costume on, you don that personality, you step into the flow of whatever's happening, and you don't stop until it's finished. And maybe a part of you, some small part of you, knows that there is a reality before and after this. But if you're going to do it well, that's not where your mind is. Your mind is only on where you are and what comes next. So here's Master. He sees this vision. They must be Americans. He gets on the first ship that you can sail on right after the war was over, and he lands here in the city of Boston. That's what I was going to say. That's where I was going. When I went to Europe, I was so impressed by the fact that the Florentines thought they were really special, because all that time ago, Michelangelo was painting in their city. And being so American, I would look at them and think, what does that have to do with you? You know, how can you possibly be proud of something that you didn't accomplish at all? That was when I saw how American my mind was. I went to India, and you have the same thing, you know, this great pride in this ancient culture that you didn't create. You know, and Americans are very freed. We carry the burden for ourselves. And that's self-realization, you see. We have to be responsible. That's one of the terrific messages Master brought. Spiritual responsibility is in our own hands. Not dogmas, not priests, not sectarianism. You can't just say, I'm a this, I'm a Congregationalist, therefore I'll be saved. I'm a Catholic, therefore I'm sure to go to heaven. Master just says it's your own spine. And it's either cleared and uplifted or it's not. And that's something that works for us, because we just get that. We're all the same, and we just are what we are. Nonetheless, now I'll give it back to you Bostonians, this is where he came. And this is where he spent 5 years. And that's a long time. His life wasn't that long. 4 years. 5 years? 4. Okay, I got it wrong. 4 years, nonetheless. But he was here getting used to the American culture. I've been getting used to the East Coast culture in the week that I've been here. And I'm just walking everywhere, just thinking, what was he picking up? What was he feeling? What was he tuning into? You know, and it just was fascinating. And he was picking up Dr. Lewis and a few other really key disciples, just getting used to how these people think and what they do. I mean, from a strictly cultural point of view, what an enormous shift from India at that time to America at this time. But still, he found here, as he would find everywhere, deep and sincere souls who had been born here and were born to meet him, and this is what it was for. And then he starts, you know, going lecturing, and he had so many different topics: India, health, healing, meditation, culture, literature, success, all these extremely colorful and practical, and you'll get something that you really want sort of topics that he would give. Harvard University and this college and you know, that professor, and you could just see him walking around. Because I've walked around so much with Swamiji, I can easily imagine exactly how Master did it. He was just completely open to everyone, absolutely, uninhibited. The story he tells about the teenage girl snickering at him because of his foreign dress. And he turns around and says, if you came to my country, you would be the heathen, and we would treat you politely. He just didn't hesitate to speak up. There was no part of him that felt that he didn't belong, that he didn't have a right, and that he just didn't meet everyone eye to eye with his whole spiritual being. And he just moved through this planet like we're all supposed to move through this planet. I mean, the reality of his life is so much more interesting than a kind of distant cardboard idea. I mean, he was a man in his 20s when he came here. He was in a very unusual country. He was learning to speak the language. He had a thick accent people couldn't understand. He looked exotic, and nobody knew who he was. I was talking to you about those years with Ananda when Swami's position was by no means clear-cut. And anybody who related to Master, there was nothing they could imitate. It wasn't like now where where the cultures are blended and, this is a guru and this is how I'm supposed to behave and this is what we do. I was driving in the car with Swami Kriyananda once and I made some very, just some cheeky comment about something. I was a little cheeky. And I sort of suddenly wondered, I just got insecure. And I said, Swamiji, did anyone ever tease Master? And Swami said, oh no, he said he never did. He said, I was so young, I was in constant awe of him. I would never have been relaxed enough to be able to be like that. Interestingly, Swamiji said 15 years later when he went to India and he met Anandamoyi Ma, he said by that point he understood more deeply. And he said he was able to have the kind of relationship with Anandamoyi Ma, which was very relaxed and very natural and very spontaneous, that he was never able to have with Master, because he was too much in awe of him. But when I asked Swamiji, did anyone ever tease Master? And he said Dr. Lewis and Master had been young men together. So when Dr. Lewis met Master, of course Master was giving these lectures and being impressive that way, and certainly Master passed over to Dr. Lewis these experiences and this perception of expanded reality, but still, Master was just an Indian man alone in this country. And Dr. Lewis took him in, and he came and visited their house, and he related to their child, and they went out walking and hiking and being together and making plans for the work that they were going to do. They used to wrestle on the floor. And so Dr. Lewis always had that just companionable, friends together energy. But it's not out of character, even for a very great soul, because he is embracing the whole story. He's living the life that all of us live. Now, such a one, as Swami they always have a completely different inner reality. They always have this, they never lose, I suppose the dignity of omnipresence is almost a way to describe it. And all the time I knew Swami, even though he laughed heartily, many times you've heard him read P.G. Wodehouse sometimes and he would just become overcome with laughter. He loved to laugh and joke, and it was always fun because to make him laugh. Whatever was going on, he always appreciated a good joke, and the people around him were humorous. So it was very easy he made it easy to be relaxed around him, especially in those early years. I was saying toward the end, he basically, toward the end, he just grew tired of the personality. That would be the best way I could say it. He just lost interest in the personality, and he sort of stopped having one. He just didn't really have that much of a personality at the end, and was just much more lost on a different plane. He just didn't see this world in the same way. And I think when Swamiji came to Master, that's more what he found in Master. That Master was at the end, and he was just working on a different level, and he didn't need the same personality he'd needed when he was younger. Because all of this is just for the service of the work. You know, I started all of this back at the word happiness, which obviously we're not going to do anything I thought we were going to do today, but that's all right. Whenever I try to impose on a room what I think we were supposed to do, it never works. So if it goes away, I just let it go away. I hope you don't mind. But all of this was coming back to the Finding Happiness movie, and when I was there in Goa showing the movie to him, that's what I was going to say. That's where it was an hour ago. So we put this movie on for Swami to watch, and of course, you know, we thought we had a winner here. We were very when Ted Nicolau, who was the director, you know, made the director's cut, and then a handful of us went down to Los Angeles, and you know, we're playing the movie. We're playing the movie thing. I get into the taxi at the airport. I can't resist saying it. Oh, I'm here working on a film. I made zero impression on the taxi driver. I made a big impression on myself. So we went over to a screening room, you know, so-and-so screening rooms, and we sat in the big leather chairs in a little private room with a little screen, and wow, it knocked our socks off. We couldn't believe it. Ted gets all the credit for that movie. He really does. I mean, what he had to work with and what he made from it were just stunning. At some point in the film process, when I was losing heart, Ted said to me, "I've never in my life met a film I couldn't fix in the editing room." And he was true to his word. I mean, the scenes that I thought didn't have a prayer, he reconstructed them in the editing room, and they came out great. I mean, in my opinion. But when we watched it there, the director's cut, and it morphed quite a bit. It improved quite a lot from that. But I was speechless. I thought it was just, I felt like we did it. This is going back to finding happiness. We are what we are. You know, Ananda is an odd duck. It's not really your, you know, mainstream reality on any level. It's, we say it's either the lunatic fringe or the cutting edge, just depending on your perspective. But it's definitely not down the middle. And it is not a mass movement. I wish to God it were. Swami tells us, and Master promises that, you know, this is the future, but it's not so much the present. You may have heard at one time when Michael Jackson was at the height before he before he went down, when he was still really up, and he was the most popular and best known musician in the world. Some of the teenagers in our community found out that Swamiji did not know who he was and had never heard any of his music. And they decided that they needed to rectify this, that this was really something that should not stand. So they sent him a couple of what they thought were the best cuts or whatever from his recordings. And Swami dutifully listened to them. And afterwards he made several interesting comments. Swamiji being, you know, extremely fair. The first thing he said is that this man is a great artist. He said he knows exactly what he wants to do. He has absolute clarity, and he executes it to perfection. You know, given what he's trying to do, it could not be done any better. And then the second thing he says is he's exactly in tune with the vibration of this world at this time, which is why he was such a worldwide phenomenon. And then Swami added, and it tells me about himself, Swami says about himself, I am completely out of tune with this culture. And I have no wish to be in tune with this culture. He said, I'm working for a reality that isn't here yet. You know, I'm a way shower, and it's going to be a long time. I often think of the body of work that Swami Kriyananda did, his music, his books, Ananda itself. It's like there's a whole society of self-realization there. I mean, his books covered every aspect of life. It's all there. And at some point, people will care. And when they care, they'll find it. but it had to be laid out, because you can't lay it out in the moment. You have to, revolutionaries are always ahead. When Jesus died, there was apparently nothing. And you had to know, we had to have far sight or faith to know that where it was going. The path had to be cut in front of it. So with this movie, I watched it and I felt that we had truthfully presented who we are. And that, artistically there's many different ways to accomplish the same goal. But this movie is Ananda. And because Ted had the sense to keep it level, my main job on this was during the filming. Last night I said my informal title, please know this is a joke, I called myself the priestess of dogma, because I was always making sure that what we were doing was what we wanted to do. Because there's lots of nuances, because I talk all the time and write, I'm aware of the nuances of how you phrase things, and somebody who doesn't think about words as much could casually say something that actually was not really true, even though they thought it was true. So I was always watching to make sure that we were where we needed to be. But I got creatively involved because I knew what the potential was. I knew the people. There was a certain point where Ted wanted the movie to be a little more far out, and he got very interested in Alex and the devas in the garden and the Vastu architecture, and I kept asking him, what is it you're trying to accomplish? And then he said he wanted eccentric geniuses. Oh, eccentric geniuses! I can get you a bunch of those. So we lined up a few and ended up with Purushottama and Peter, talking about meditation. Those were very good scenes, but we need to give more substance, we need to give more original thinking. There was a few others that were possible, but the movie could only be so long. But things like that. But then a lot of my ideas were really, really terrible. Because, this is my grandchild chewing an apple, isn't she darling, And then here's her when she's halfway through the apple, isn't she darling? It's my own story and I love every bit of it. So Ted could always tell when we were becoming awful, really. And we used to joke that there were two movies that we could make. One of them was very good and the other was really awful, and there was nothing in between. And every time we'd sort of fall over into awful, he would pull the thing back. In fact, when I was in LA for the focus group. We actually showed it to a focus group. Just as it happened, I was the only one of our team that was able to go to Los Angeles to be at the focus group where there were 60 people again. This is one of these real Hollywood things. They have this whole system and they bring the focus group together and so on. And the next morning I'm talking to our publicist staff. I'm the only one of the Ananda crowd that's there. And they asked me, the singing was really hard for people. The people dressed up in rainbow colored clothes, like this. And at one point, these are very nice people, but they're just Hollywood people, are the ones we've hired. Do you really do that? I said, you mean dress up in rainbow colors and sing? Yeah, we do it all the time. But we had a lot more of it in the original movie. And actually, we spent another $50,000 to take a lot of the pictures of us just doing that. And you'll notice that the music starts and then it goes into pictures of Ananda. Because it just didn't work. All those clean, bright faces just... It didn't say what we thought it would say. But anyway, there I am, and I arrive in Goa, and I've got this thing, and just the whole planet is waiting. Shivani has made me swear that, the minute Swami blinks yes or no, I will, send her a text. Everybody's watching the time, I'm having to email, I'm on my way, I'm walking over, I'm almost at the hotel, like this. So we sit and watch it like this under these ridiculous conditions with him with his headphones on, and I'm sitting next to him, and he just goes into this bhav is the only word, you know. I think he had his arms folded like this with his headphones on, just staring at the screen, and I'm watching the screen. Only at a certain point did I look down at the computer and see how unsynced we were. Swami's just gone. I mean, he's got that look that he would get so often at that time, just with his eyes upraised, his mouth just slightly open, just like that, just curled up like this, and tears are just running. Tears are just running down his face. Tears are running down my face. You know, it was just... And after it was over, he just said, you know, it's perfect. He said, it's just, and it wasn't, we changed it a lot, but he said, it's perfect. And then he just said exactly what Shivani had hoped. He says, it just encapsulates all of my life's work, he said, and there it is, I can see it. And he said what struck him so deeply, which he loved so much, is that it came out of everybody. You know, it's like, in fact, people reference Swami, but very little. It wasn't as Swami says, and as Swami tells us, and as Swamiji did, and as, you know, everybody just says it as their own truth. And Swamiji remarked how just articulate everyone was, and intelligent in their point of view, but what touched him and moved him so much was he could see that it had been transferred. And that's really what gave him permission to go, in a very real sense, because he did what he came to do. Master gave it to him, and then he gave it to us. And so now, you know, each one can just step back. I've done my part, and I can step back, because I know it's been given over, and it's really there. Like we know that. Whether the world ever loves this movie or not, it is who we are, and they'll like it or not like it, but what they're liking and not liking is the movie. I mean, is us, because the movie simply does it, and whatever criticism they make, it's just they're not in tune with it, and that's fine. It's not like they need to be. But it was right there. And then for the rest of the evening, we went out to a we went to a different hotel for the wonderful dinner. Swami just kept saying, and he also said, Master said this idea of communities would spread like wildfire. And Swamiji said, I could never imagine how that could happen. He said, but I think this movie could do that. Isn't it interesting? It's just like the mechanism, because this is Dwapara Yuga. You put it into a film, all of a sudden it can literally go all over the planet. You know, every language can understand it. Either you dub it in or you put subtitles, so there's no problem of language or culture or anything. And it could be everywhere at the same time. Oh, this is how it's going to happen. And we went another year. I've been working on it, and then when the final version was shown to Swamiji, it must have been March, and he died in April. And he saw the absolute final version at that point again, and again, just, it's perfect. It's just exactly what we were trying to make it be. Yeah, it's been quite a journey. And it's your journey. You know, now I'm here, and as it turns out, what I spent this morning doing is telling you a whole story about Swami Kriyananda's life. And because we're at the point where Master launched, I mean, why are we sitting here? We're sitting here because Master was in that storeroom and he saw all those faces, and then he came here and he landed in this city and he found Dr. Lewis and the others that he found here, and he wandered around doing little things, and not many people came. He did have his big hall events, which we haven't really, except in India, succeeded in getting, you know, big numbers to come. At the end of Swami's life, we were getting, you know, thousands to come, but not often and not always. Most of what Master did, it was just a very, very tiny handful of people. But it was the right handful. Master, when he had a class and he gave a lecture and there were 5,000 people there and he was giving a series afterwards, remember Dr. Lewis said, oh, we'll have so many people for our classes, and Master said 5. And 5 came. 1 out of 1,000. But it was just the way it was. On one hand, this huge splash was necessary, and he did make that huge splash, but those masses of people who wander in and are touched are all souls who have divine destiny. Master said no one crossed his path except that Divine Mother wanted it to be so. Think about that. At the same time, only a handful actually hear it and are really in tune with it. And of that handful, we all have different karma in relation to it. Some of us are just going to go on more or less living as our karmic trajectory has us live, but we will now be vibrating with this reality. Others, like myself, just were born for nothing else. And this is my full-time job. This was my incarnation, was my full-time job. But Master started it, and he gave it to those who would take it. Last night I was asked, after the movie, what's been the effect on Ananda of Swami's passing, which is, of course, a very good question. But I said from day one, Swami gave to others as much responsibility as they were willing to take. He never held it. There was he had no reason to hold it. He wasn't a man who was trying to have power. It's like, as he said himself, I've been a leader for so many incarnations, I don't really think about it anymore. They just passed it out to as many as possible. Swamiji also said once, on his 80th birthday, Master always said to him, you have a great work to do. After Master died, Rajasi repeated that from time to time. And one time he said, Master has a great work to do through you, and he will give you the strength to do it. And then at that birthday, Swami told us that story, and then he looked at this crowd of many hundreds. He said, and you are the strength that Master has sent me to do this. Because only one person can't. What I see now happening, and I sort of feel like, in this time when we're walking around and we're touching the rootstock of what we're doing. This is the point from which it all comes forward like this. Just a second, I lost that thought. Just give me a moment here. I have that, but the rest of it just slipped away from me.
And it's been passed on. As we're walking around.
It'll come as we're walking around. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Thank you. Maybe your comment about what happens to our minds was relating to more than you. As we grow older, our minds enfeeble a little bit. But people had often asked me before Swamiji died what I thought the effect would be of his passing, and it was stupid not to think about it because he was so close to the edge so many times. Miriam told a story. She was his nurse when one of the really bad crises happened when they were in Pune, India, and he really didn't like to be in the hospital. But something was going on with his kidneys that was so severe that they really needed to be in a hospital setting to fix him, but he really didn't want to be in the hospital. So Miriam felt, rightly, that this was not really her choice. So she just sat with Swami. They're on the gurney in the hospital, and she says to him, you don't have to stay here, but if we leave here, I'll make you as comfortable as you can, but your body will give out within a day or so. And if you're ready to do that, we can easily just do that. But if you don't want to give up your body now, we're going to have to stay in the hospital. And she said, Swami closed his eyes and just thought about it for a moment. And he said, no, there's more I have to do. And he lived a couple more years after that, so he went into the hospital. A couple of more years at the most, because that was really close to the end. But no, there's more I have to do. Let's just rev it up again. Let's do more repairs on the system. But when I was thinking about what would happen when Swami died, before he died, I thought that even though Swamiji has distributed enormous responsibility to everyone, and in the 27 years that David and I have been in charge of developing the Ananda Palo Alto scene, which was one of the first urban communities, so there was no prototype. It became the prototype but there wasn't one when we were doing it. Swamiji has given us specific instruction twice. Yeah, twice. And once we were about to dissolve the ashram house before we had the community, and he referred to a particular devotee who had come down there to work in the bookstore, and he said it wouldn't be fair to her. You know, you can't have her just live without her Guru Bhais around her. It wouldn't be fair to her. Okay, we won't do it. And the other thing, we thought someone was giving us land for a retreat. We were going to open a retreat in the Bay Area, and the expanding light was just getting off the ground. And Swamiji said, if you start an Ananda retreat in the Bay Area, he said, it's just going to kill the expanding light. He said, we need a retreat there like we need a hole in the head. That's what he said. We thought it was being given to us, so we weren't even going. And David, I went like this, David, I'm picking up he doesn't favor this. Are you getting But that's all. But then when I stood up at the dedication of our community, and Swamiji was sitting right behind me, because it was like he was sitting with the dignitaries and I'm at the microphone, even though that was the entire instruction we'd been given, and I don't even think the retreat had come up yet, it was just, don't leave this woman without her Guru Bhais, I had this sudden, almost eerie feeling that I had just been his instrument. That what I thought were my own ideas were not my own ideas. He was just putting them in the ether and I was finding them. And that was excuse me, and that was entirely and only what was going on. I actually became almost sort of, and you'll hear Swami say, I've founded 9 communities and 4 schools and 2 retreats. He always uses the personal pronoun, which is actually exactly accurate. Because I always knew what to do. David and I always knew what to do. I mean, I don't mean like this, but we just always knew what to do. It was there for us to do, and that wasn't our own wisdom. It was just, he was founding a community, and we were the ones on the spot. Now, having said all of that, nonetheless, the physical reality of Swamiji, just simply all the balloon strings were in his hand. No matter how long the strings, all the kite strings you might say, or the bunch of balloons, they were still all in his hands. And so everything could go out a certain distance, but there was still an anchor point. But when his body dissolved, it was like the anchor point became infinity. And everyone, everywhere, suddenly the way I described it at the time, at his memorial service, was there's no geographic center anymore. There was always a geographic center, and I mean, not everyone was aware of it as much as I was, because I was always in touch with him and was often, traveling across the globe to be in that geographic center. And whenever I was there, I was extremely conscious of that. But it was still true whether people knew it or not. And that geographic center just went infinite. And all of the creativity that he was still holding, because he still needed to define it. I'm going to just, I know we're almost out of time here, but Swamiji said when Master was alive, he allowed people to do almost nothing. He did not delegate. And Swami talks about when they were talking about the garden or something, this is in the path, and Swamiji said, I have certain ideas for the garden, sir. And Master says, speaking I think of Ananda Mata, Ananda Mata knows my will for the garden. And Swami, in his own book, is honest enough to say, can't I have any ideas of my own? And then he overcame that, but he reacted to that. But Swamiji writes later that he said, Master, everything had to be defined by his vibration, even the smallest thing, because he was setting such a powerful pattern that's going to last for millennia. And he couldn't allow it to be diluted anywhere, because water only flows from its highest point. And if he gave too much of it away, it would be diluted from the start. That's why Swamiji himself never allows himself to be considered the 6th guru. He said, we have avatars, we need to keep our focus exactly where it is. And whatever role he plays, we mustn't miss where this is coming from. But Swamiji could give it away more, but not that much, because he's still too close to the source in his perception, his vision is still too much greater than everyone else's. So even though he was able to delegate more, he still, on a very powerful level, held it. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't need to be in tune with Swamiji and Master, but the expression of it is different. And I'm saying this to all of you because here you are. You know, here you are. And each one of us has to decide what we're being called to do. Bear in mind, we're not all being called to do the same thing. But everybody has to decide, what am I being called to do? You know, what am I seeing, what am I feeling, and how can I be true to the gifts that have been given me and be fruitful and multiply them, you know, in whatever way that may mean for each one of us. So that was entirely not what I was going to do. There you are. Okay. I think that was the end. Do we have any thoughts or questions? Or
yes. I can't hold it back. What you say and what you said is profound, because the full truth of what Swami was expressing was finding happiness. It's the thread, it's the most common thread, it's the most emphatic essence of what's all transpired in his life is finding happiness. The title, the expression that you have given us is just so, it had to come to be this way. Mm-hmm. And the essence of what you say and the way you ended it was absolutely profound. It was so profound that most people may not get that profoundness of it. It's because the way that the information was passed from Master to Swamiji is exactly how you're carrying that same emphasis, that motion, that movement that Swamiji gives to us. Mm-hmm. It's that the same flow that you express. So,
well, I think I was born to do it, and if I succeed, it's the grace of God. That's all I can say. Yeah, thank you very much. God bless you. Christy, you had something?
Well, this was always a question I meant to clarify with Swamiji, and when he'd ask questions, I know it would never be there, but there's, just being in Boston, there was always a question of, did Master say there'd be more dark-skinned people in Boston than next month, or it's going to be a warm climate? For us East Coasters, we're going, what did he really say?
What I heard him say was that Boston would be tropical and that everyone would be brown-skinned, dark-skinned. I heard him say I heard that he said elsewhere, I never heard him say anything, that the whole world would brown. I mean, where I live, and that's probably true here too, I mean, on both coasts, inter-ethnic, cultural, racial couples are so pervasive that you're watching it. You're watching the cultures just mix together right in front of your eyes, and all the little babies are these, just shades of coffee. So I think it's, the Kali Yuga is a time, as a material age, the definition of matter is that everything is separate. That one thing is, if you're Japanese, you're not Korean. And if you're Korean, you're not Samoan. And if you're Samoan, you're not American. And everything is all in boxes because material things are different from each other. This is a water bottle and this is whatever this thing is, right? And they're just not the same thing. But when we move into the age of energy, we realize that this is an energy pattern that happens to appear like a water bottle. This energy pattern appears like this thing, whatever it is, right? And we understand that things are the same. So once consciousness begins to shift, matter begins to manifest consciousness. So now we are in this time when everything is smushing together. And species are becoming extinct, cultures are becoming extinct, languages are becoming extinct, climate zones are becoming extinct, and the Kali Yuga mind panics over this because we think we're losing all these things. But the Dwapara Yuga mind realizes that all of this just has to go because we're coming into a completely other reality. So much of what mean, this, from a certain point of view, Ananda is just so not politically hip. We're just like, we're so avant-garde and so retro simultaneously, because we're just on another planet with all this stuff. Yeah, indigenous cultures are being wiped out because that was all a Kali Yuga reality. It's not like it was a bad reality, it was just is. So now something completely other is going to take its place. And the weather in Boston will be tropical and the people will have brown skin is a pretty dramatic way of saying, kids, you don't know what's coming. Everything you know now is going to shift into something else. So, but I think we may not live to see it, but we might.
But we've heard that 1,000 times, center.
Everywhere, circumference,
You
nowhere.
see, that's the emphasis of it.
So now we're finally beginning to know it little by little. Leonora?
Thank you so much for the retrospective, the beautiful talk. I'm very curious to hear a little bit just about what happened with the farm in Half Moon Bay.
Oh.
Because I read your article and it is very touching about how quickly that was manifested right in step with everything.
I'll give you a very brief because it's a little bit specific for the
reality. I don't even know that it happened.
Swami Kriyananda, all the time that he was there, he kept telling us that we needed a place out of the city where we could grow food, and he was concerned that if times got restless, we wouldn't be safe. We were never able to manifest it. The last email he wrote to us 5 days before he died, I'm very concerned. I want you to get land outside of the city. We'd been looking for a retreat for 10 years, so we started looking for a farm. We found it almost immediately, one of the best farms in the whole area, 67 acres, complete water, absolutely isolated, the end of a road, 40 minutes from where we presently live, I mean walking distance. And it was $1.8 million and at half donations and half investment, which is to say the people actually half own it. We raised $1.8 million in 6 weeks, which is an absolute record for Ananda. We had the picture of the spiritual eye with, I mean, this was our image, the picture of the spiritual eye, and Swami was pushing money through the star. But the truth is, he fundraised for that farm for 10 years, because every time he would come, he would say to hundreds of our members, you know, you must get land in the country. So when we finally said, hey, we're going to get land in the country, they just, because it was really ready to happen. Now, I'll tell you more about that, but that's very specific, so I think I'll let it sit for the moment. But yes, it was a very dramatic example of the fact that Swamiji's energy, because it was way beyond anything we could have done otherwise. We have a little bit of music, and I think I'd like to end with a little music, and then we're having an afternoon together, so there's lots of time to talk more. Okay?